Jai Hind, Namaste, hello and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav and in this video we'll be discussing the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 28th of October 2020. Now for your convenience, I have added timestamps in the description, so if you want to skip to a particular news, you can use those timestamps. And the PDFs for selected topics are available on my Telegram channel, the link to which is also in the description. And also if you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new videos that we post. And please give us a thumbs up if you like our videos. So without wasting your time, let's get started. So starting with the Hindu, US to support India's defense of territory. So 2+2 finally happened. Let us see what happened. So as usual, Mr. Pompeo was very hawkish when it came to China. He said that Communist Party of China is no friend to any democracy. Some agreements were signed. BECA we know. Then an MOU on technical cooperation in Earth observations and Earth sciences. An agreement to extend duration of MOU regarding Global Center for Nuclear Energy Partnership, then an agreement on electronic exchange of customs data, and a letter of intent regarding cooperation in traditional Indian medicines. Now this is upcoming field in our cooperation with the US. Then a joint statement was also issued which said that India and US, they have shared goals in the Asia Pacific region, that it should be open, especially the South China Sea region, and it should be based on international law, the rules governing all the rights and interests of any nation in that region should be in accordance with international law, and it should not be prejudicial to any country. Then we already know about BECA. It will enable exchange of geospatial data and information acquired from multiple sources like satellites, UAVs, reconnaissance aircrafts and aerostats. So we will get access to this data from multiple sources, and this will help to improve the accuracy of our weapon systems like missiles and armed drones in future during precision strikes. So this is very, very important. This Quad and growing collaboration between India and US, it is being said that a new Asian NATO is taking place. So let us see what happens. Then now outsiders can buy land in J&K. So let us see what it is about. So these are the broad contours and you just have to know them. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritties. First of all, the new J&K Development Act, Center has omitted term permanent resident of a state, paving the way for investors outside J&K to invest in the UT. So outsiders can buy land. So some of the features of the new Jammu and Kashmir land laws. New land laws end the exclusive right of permanent residents because this has been changed to investors, right? Then people including investors outside J&K can purchase land now, but there will be a bar on agricultural land and it could be used only for agricultural purposes. If you want to use agricultural land for non-agricultural purposes, then there will be a problem. Then land can be transferred in favor of a person or an institution for the purpose of promotion of healthcare or senior secondary or higher or specialized education. Then an army officer not below the rank of corps commander can declare an area as strategic area for operational and training requirements of the armed forces. So these are all the things that you need to know. You don't need to get into the nitty-gritties. So in a way, you and I can go and buy land there. We can open institutions. We can open industries there, which is a very, very good thing. So let us hope more and more industries and healthcare facilities are open in the region so that it can also catch up to the development of our country. Then the editorial page, GST and the complexity of political negotiations. So I will be telling you the broad contours of this editorial. You can read it because there's nothing rocket science about it. We'll be carrying a different approach as to how to deal with this. Now let us begin. So first of all, it talks about the tussle in federation are common, and as a matter of fact, these tussles strengthen it. So here he is talking about that only. Then he gives a brief history of GST, like how GST evolved. So very simple, nothing rocket science. That is why I'm not getting into it, right? Then he tells us that COVID-19 impacted GST collection. We all know that. Then center tried to wash off its hand. Yes, it said that we are not obligated to pay for the loss of GST revenue because of Act of God, and the GST Act does not mandate the center to compensate the states for any loss occurring due to Act of God. This is what the finance minister had said. Then that led to a controversy. Then what happened? Then center agreed that states could borrow to make up for the loss, and eventually center would pay out of the GST cess. Then there was a tussle who would borrow. First center said that states, you go ahead and you borrow on your own. Then state said no, center, you borrow. Then finally center budged. So that is what has happened in terms of COVID and GST collection, right? So this is about the under strain what I've told you. Then he tells us that the GST council has been very dicey or has been very fishy in its operations. How? All the relief that it has been providing in this pandemic, it has come with strings attached. For example, in May 2020, it linked the increase in fiscal deficit of states from 2 to 3% to reforms in 4 areas. What were those 4 areas? One nation, one ration card, electricity distribution, ease of doing business, and urban local body revenues. So if states were to implement these reforms, only then they would be allowed to raise their fiscal deficit. So this was also something with strings attached. Then for GST shortfalls, Center first said that it is not obligated to pay. Then there was borrowing issue. What I told you, that Center first said that state should directly borrow. Then there was a tussle. Then Center agreed to borrow. First of all, states were not even agreeing, because the non-BJP state, they were not agreeing that they should be borrowing and Center should pay out of its own revenues. Then the second point he says is that mostly there have been no consultations in the GST council. It has just come out with press conferences. For example, the finance minister of Kerala said that there was no consultation. They just came out with a press conference, right? Then he tells us why states gave up their authority of taxation powers under this FRBMA and VAT, and which has now turned into GST. So he said that obvious things that were there for states to give up their power were efficiency, equity, stabilization, economic growth, and balanced development, none of which really happened. Then he talks about how party system of politics influences these federal relations. So when there was one party rule, initially Congress rule, then there were no problems between center and state, and even if there were problems, they were handled within the party and did not come out in the open in the government forums, right? Then when there was end of one party rule, then Congress tried all it could to misuse Article 356 to basically suppress the opposition rule states. Then came the coalition era in the 1990s. So in the coalition era, the states had greater say, and he gives example of VAT, how it was the states finance ministers who took charge in formulating the VAT. And then finally we are back to one party system, and again all the problems that are occurring between center and states, especially the BJP ruled states, they are being solved within the party system and they are not coming out in the open. And the non-BJP states are less, so they don't have any major say in the national politics, and that also impacts the federal relations. So this is what this editorial is talking about. You can just go through these instructions and you can read that editorial. It will solve all your problems. India's DisCom stress is more than the sum of its part. So these two people, they wrote this editorial, they gave some opinions which we are not interested in, but they have pointed out the problems that plague our DisComs. So we will be discussing those problems. What are DisComs? DisComs are the electricity distribution companies. That is why they are called DisComs. They basically buy electricity and then they sell to the consumers, right? Now what are the problems? Number one is dues, and these dues are of 3 types. First, the regulators that set the tariffs, they have not fixed the cost reflective tariffs. That means that the tariffs don't actually reflect the costs that are incurred in procuring the power. Number 2, about a 1/7 of DisCom cost structures is meant to be covered through explicit subsidies by state governments, but state governments do not transfer these subsidies to the respective DisComs, and that is why they are in financial distress. Then consumers, in the financial year 2018-19, the consumers owed DisComs over 1.8 lakh crores, such a big substantial amount that is owed to DisComs, and that is why they are faring so bad in terms of their operations. Then second problem is states are defaulters. State governments, they are the biggest defaulters. Estimated third of trade receivables, that is the overdue bills, are from the state governments, and they are also not paying the subsidies either in full or on time. So number one, they are not paying subsidies, and number two, they are not even paying their own bills. Now if we see this on an annual cash flow basis, the shortfall in subsidy payments, they appear very small, about 1%, but over the past decade, they have accumulated to about 70,000 crores that the state governments owe to the DisComs. Again, such a big shortfall, right? Now, what happened that earlier there was an equilibrium between the increasing of dues and relying on continued subsidies, and there was steady growth in the electricity sector, so it did not affect them that much, because you see only 1% on an annual basis the shortcoming of subsidies are, right? But COVID-19, it completely shattered incoming cash flows because the consumers, they stopped consuming electricity. Many factories, many manufacturing units shut down. So there was a huge decline in the demand for electricity, and that really hit the DisComs in two ways. Number one, that their revenue shrunk because people were not consuming electricity. Number two, they had to buy electricity because whenever they sign contracts with the power companies, they do so under obligation that they have to buy certain amount of electricity. So their income was less, but their expenditure was the same. So that is what he's telling. So there was multi-month dip in demand, and it became worse since the lockdown disproportionately impacted revenues, right, from the customers, commercial and industrial segments. This reduced demand did not save as much because large fraction of DisCom cost structures are locked in through power purchase agreements that they have to buy, they have to offtake that electricity. So it did not save much except for the power companies who saved some fuel. Now they are also facing a threat from renewable sector because what is happening that the premium customers, that is the big consumers like manufacturing units, industries, now government is pushing them towards more and more use of renewable energy. For example, agriculture. For the past 2 days, we have been discussing the role of solar panels in agriculture. Yesterday, we discussed how women are being trained to be technicians. And day before yesterday, we discussed the Suryodaya Yojana in Gujarat. So these premium customers are trying to shift to renewable energy because there are incentives for that. So what will happen? First of all, their daytime usage would decrease because solar power, wind power is generated more during the day. So they can directly use that from the grid. So daytime usage would decrease. Number two, when the battery technologies mature, so the energy that is produced from renewable sources, it could also be stored. So their dependence on DisComs, the dependence of premium customers on DisComs would further decrease. Now, even without batteries right now, if regulations permit, they would want to find third-party suppliers under competitive models. So for example, there is a DisCom which is just providing conventional electricity. There is another supplier which is providing renewable at a very cheap cost because of heavy subsidy from governments, and it also gets them some carbon credits, those companies. So they would be going for this renewable energy. So this would further hurt the revenues of the DisComs. So these are the three big problems that DisComs face in our country. Number one, the dues, which are of three types. Then number two, state governments being the biggest defaulters. And number three, threat from renewable energy. This is what that you need to know from this editorial. Then this editorial, dead letter. This is again about Chile. We discussed yesterday. So just some selected points. Since its transition to democracy in 1990, Chile has amended the constitution principally written by Pinochet aide Jaime Guzman and approved in a fraudulent plebiscite in 1980 to take away many of the anti-democratic features. Now, what happened? That protests erupted last year over small rise in metro fares, but soon snowballed into a public agitation demanding reforms. Now, what were the reforms that they were asking for? An abolition of private pension system, an increase in investments in education and healthcare, strengthening of the rights of the indigenous communities, and they also demanded an overhaul of the constitution as it was impossible to introduce far-reaching reforms with the current charter. So that is why they are reforming the constitution. What was happening in Chile? That the economic system was being run on Friedman's school of thought, which is basically all about privatization. It talks about minimum role of government and maximum rule of free market economics. So there was no social security net for the people, and because of this pandemic, the problems aggravated further, though it was happening since last year, because people had no jobs, they had no social security, there was no government mandated healthcare or education system. They were not good systems there. So they basically were not happy with all of it. And those changes could happen in the past because it was a dictatorial regime, but with times things have changed, right? Now there's also a role of US, because in every Latin American country where there's a problem, there's also a role of US. So USA has been supporting dictators in the Latin American region. So this is what happened in the case of Mr. Pinochet as well. He came to power in 1973 after US-backed coup against Chile's elected president, Salvador Allende. In 17 years he was in power. Pinochet, who died in 2006, unleashed a reign of terror, resulting in executions of thousands and detention and torture of many more. So this friend that we have got in US, it is not such a saint. The biggest problem with the present constitution has been its origins. Now, through a democratic process, Chileans can bury the document and introduce a legitimate charter. But there are some problems. Replacing the constitution is going to be a 2-year process. Next year, Chileans will elect a 155-member assembly to draft the new document, which will then be put to plebiscite in 2022. Half the delegates will be women. Political factions are still debating whether seats in the assembly should be reserved for the indigenous groups. So there are some frictions. Let us see if they get ironed out. So what were the reforms that they were asking again? Abolition of private pension fund system, increase in investment in education and healthcare, strengthening of the rights of the indigenous communities, right? So that is why an overhaul of the constitution. This constitution was formed in the 1980s by Jaime Guzman, who was a right hand or a very close aide of Mr. Pinochet, and then there was a fraudulent plebiscite that gave a mark of approval or a stamp of approval to this constitution, right? And Chile has been amending this constitution, but now the changes that were required are so radical that they are going to form a new one, and 78% of Chileans voted in favor of replacing the charter, and it would be half men and half women. Now they are discussing whether to give place to the indigenous communities or not, and the final document would be put to again plebiscite in 2022. So this is all about it. India's outreach to Myanmar. So if you remember, we discussed how our Foreign Secretary Mr. Harsh Vardhan Shringla and our Chief of Army Staff General Major Navarne, they went for a 2-day visit to Myanmar, right? And this came close to the heels of elections that are going to happen in Myanmar, right? And why? Because Myanmar and China have had a sort of falling apart. Now this editorial is talking about the Indo-Myanmar relations. So first of all, they tell that India has always followed a policy of non-interference in the internal politics of Myanmar. Now that has helped India in a big way, because India has been able to engage with all forms of government, be it the military junta or the present democratic government. So this is what they are telling. And they say that the key factor behind military regime's decision to open the country when it initiated reform was in part to reduce dependence on China. And again, Myanmar is coming close to India because it wants to reduce its dependence on China, because they are aware of the predatory practices that China does in the name of friendship, right? Now, what are the recent initiatives? I will just give you the broad outlines. So, number one, India inaugurated a liaison office in the Embassy of India in Naypyidaw. Now, India has become the second country to do so. China already did that in 2017, so we are just catching up. Then number two, India proposed to build a petroleum refinery in Myanmar, which would involve an investment of $6 billion. Now, this basically is an indication of Myanmar's growing significance in India's strategic calculus, particularly in energy security. Then another area of cooperation has been the development of border areas between the two. And finally, New Delhi has been playing a balancing act between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and it remains one of its keys to the overall approach to the Rohingya issue. So Delhi reiterated its support for ensuring safe, sustainable and speedy return of displaced persons to Myanmar by positioning as playing an active role in facilitating the return of Rohingya refugees to Myanmar. India has made it clear that it supports Myanmar's efforts and also understands Bangladesh's burden. So again, India is playing a very fine balancing act between the two. For Delhi, engaging rather than criticizing is the most practical approach to finding a solution, and that is what New Delhi has been doing. So this is all about it. Just the background that India has never meddled into the internal affairs, that has helped India to deal with different governments, and the recent areas of cooperation, liaison office, then petroleum refinery, then expansion in the cooperation in border areas, and balancing act between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Then the Gilgit-Baltistan game plan. So basically now Pakistan is going to convert Gilgit-Baltistan into a full-fledged province of Pakistan. Earlier it did not do so. So we will see why it did not do so, what is the history of Gilgit-Baltistan and why is it doing so. Now let us get into it. So let us first look at the map. This is the Gilgit Agency, Baltistan, and then this is the Shakskan Valley that Pakistan ceded to China in 1963. Now why this region is important for China, we'll see China's stakes as well, because CPEC runs through this region, and I've told you before as well. Now see this region, This is the Siachen Glacier that is controlled by India. This is Aksai Chin, illegally controlled by China. This is the Gilgit-Baltistan and POK region, illegally controlled by Pakistan, right? So now let us get into this. So Pakistan government is on the verge of declaring Gilgit-Baltistan a province. Now earlier Islamabad hesitated from doing so because they had created a narrative and that they claimed that J&K is a disputed territory and its future must be decided by plebiscite among all its inhabitants. So to keep it in a state of flux, to maintain international pressure, it never fully integrated this region. Now its brief history. This was a part of state of Jammu and Kashmir at the time of partition, but the Dogra rule was very light in this region. Why? Because this region, especially Gilgit, was very strategically important. It was the playground for great game in Central Asia. So as a result, the Maharaja of Kashmir had leased it to the British and it was under the British government until the lapse of suzerainty or the lapse of British Empire in India. Now what was the great game in Central Asia? It was in 19th century a political and diplomatic competition between Russia and British empires for territory and influence among Central Asian states. So Gilgit has its own British officered local army called the Gilgit Scouts, and they switched allegiance to Pakistan within a week of Maharaja's accession to India. Now from the beginning, Gilgit-Baltistan was governed as a separate entity by Pakistan and not as a part of POK. So this is the brief history of Gilgit-Baltistan. Now why change the status now? Some important points. First, revocation of Article 370 by India and bifurcation of J&K into two UTs. So it sent out a signal that this dispute is not only dead but buried as far as New Delhi is concerned. So Pakistan wanted to give a tit for tat for India. So that is why they are integrating Gilgit into their own country. Second is the public opinion in Gilgit-Baltistan. They have long been in favor of full integration because the people in this province are predominantly Shia and they are ethnically distinct from the population of POK and they have very little in common with them. So Islamabad feels that if they declare the province, it will assuage the domestic dissatisfaction on this score. And it is very important to note that the rallies that are happening in Pakistan, there is a very big discontent against Mr. Imran Khan in this Gilgit-Baltistan region. So that is why he is playing this trick. So he is also catering to the international pressure and he is also catering to the domestic pressure through this move. Now comes the role of China. Now for China, this region has two specialities. Let me show you through the map. First, see this one. See, this is the CPEC that is running through Gilgit-Baltistan. So there are basically two interests of China in this region. Number one is economic interest, that's CPEC running, and number two, China wants to put its military in the region. Why? Because it is fearing that this war could be a very long thing, this standoff in Ladakh. So it is trying to open a two-front situation to pressurize India. Now China thinks that Pakistan will be very happy at the thought that China is going to open a two-front war against India. And secondly, if Gilgit-Baltistan is a part of Pakistan, if it is fully integrated into Pakistan, then the international community won't have so much of problem with Chinese troops in the region. Already this region has a very high concentration of civilian Chinese population, right? So the two interests for China are number one, economic, protection of its CPC, and number two, military, two-front pressure on India. So that is why China is pushing its baby Pakistan to integrate this Gilgit-Baltistan fully into the Pakistan state. So that is what these points are saying, that CPEC runs through Gilgit-Baltistan and China has invested heavily in the region. So it wants to protect its interests and it also wants to repay India in its own coin following India's decision to separate Ladakh from J&K, because they fear that this move could be first step of India towards attempting to enforce its claim on Aksai Chin, which is currently under Chinese occupation. And why Aksai Chin is important for China? Because it connects Tibet and Xinjiang, Chinese State Highway 219. So China considers Gilgit-Baltistan very important because of its strategic location. It is contiguous to Ladakh as well as Xinjiang and could act as a staging point against India if a major conflict erupts in Ladakh. That is what I told you. Beijing possibly presumes that Pakistan will agree to a Chinese military presence in Gilgit-Baltistan because Islamabad would like to see India embroiled in a two-front war in Ladakh and Gilgit. There is already substantial civilian Chinese present in the region. Delinking the region from Kashmir dispute would make it easier for international community to accept Chinese presence in Gilgit-Baltistan. So that is why China is pushing Pakistan for that move. So these are the reasons as to why Pakistan is considering this action. India's response has been, it has vehemently opposed this move, and it has again told Pakistan that Gilgit-Baltistan is an integral part of Indian state. Pakistan or its judiciary has no locus standi when it comes to Gilgit-Baltistan. Kerala government fixes base price for 16 agricultural produce. So Kerala government has always been very, very innovative. Now they have come out with the latest scheme. Let us see what this scheme is all about. So Kerala termed this first of its kind initiative in the country. Now this is similar to the MSP regime that we have for grains, wheat, paddy and other pulses and all, right? So on similar lines, Kerala has come out with a base price for 16 agricultural items, including vegetables, fruits and tubers. This scheme will come into effect from November 1, the state formation day. It will benefit farmers with a maximum cultivation area of 15 acres per season. So these are the prices. Now this base price will be 20% above the price of cultivation. What it costs the farmer, 20% above that. And if you remember, MSP is minimum 50% of what it costs the farmer, right? This is designed to protect farmers from adverse price fluctuations. 20% above the production cost would benefit a farmer with cultivation of maximum 15 acres in a season. The farmer would have to register on Agriculture Department's registration portal after insuring the crop. So there is crop insurance and also registration to get the benefit of the base price. There is a huge role for self-government institutions as they would coordinate the procurement and distribution of vegetables, and any excess produce would be converted into value added products, that is food processing. So see what a beautiful scheme. The scheme also envisages setting up of supply chain process such as cold storage facilities and refrigerated vehicles. So very, very good initiative by Kerala. When it comes to policy innovations and good policies, Kerala certainly leads from the front. Then page 9, India designates 18 persons based in Pakistan as terrorists. Just 18, it should be almost half the country anyways. So this designation is by the Union Home Ministry, and it has put the designation under the UAPA Act 1967, which was amended in August last year to empower the Union Home Ministry to designate individuals as terrorists. This includes 7 Indians who are now in Pakistan. For example, Dawood Ibrahim, right? Earlier 13 individuals were in the list, now 18 more. The names are Hafiz Saeed and all that, so I don't really want to pollute the palate of my mouth by uttering such names. That is why I'm not getting into the names. Then page number 10, pollution winter pose a threat, says Center. So they are saying that there is a clear indication that pollution was a major contributor to COVID-19 mortality. If you remember, we discussed yesterday a study by Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health that said a 1 microgram increase in PM 2.5 exposure is associated with 8% increase in death rate due to novel coronavirus. So this is also what the government of India is saying, right? Now there is also a talk about Kawasaki disease. So let me tell you what it is. So it is a syndrome of unknown cause that results in fever, mainly affects children under 5 years of age, and new studies are showing that even children are carriers of coronavirus and they are turning into super spreaders and super carriers. Earlier it was believed that children are better protected, but now it is becoming more evident that they are being spreaders and super spreaders, right? Now getting back to Kawasaki, it leads to swelling of blood vessels in the body, and it is a leading cause of heart disease in kids. Now it is not exactly known what causes it, but it damages a child's coronary arteries. Scientists haven't found an exact cause for Kawasaki disease. Might be linked to genes, bacteria and other causes. Disease probably isn't contagious, but it sometimes happens in clusters in a community. Kids are more likely to get it in winter and spring. So that is what is happening in India right now. Now, age usually affects children who are 5 or younger. Boys are 1.5 times more likely to get it than girls. And if you talk about ethnicity, children of Asian descent are more likely to have the Kawasaki disease. So this is about the Kawasaki disease. Then page 13, US to sell defense systems worth 2.5 billion to Taiwan. So US is going to sell Harpoon coastal defense systems to Taiwan. This deal comes close to the heels of 1 billion missile deal last week, and China has also imposed some sanctions on US companies and individuals for this deal, but US does not care. This involves 100 Harpoon coastal defense systems, which include 400 RGM Harpoon block surface launch missiles with a range of 125 kilometers, manufactured by Boeing, can be positioned on fixed platforms or mounted trucks. Now there is an ever-growing threat of Chinese invasion. That is why this is happening. Democratic self-ruled Taiwan is under constant threat of invasion by China, whose leaders view the island as part of their territory. They have vowed to seize Taiwan one day by force if necessary. Chinese fighter jets and bombers have entered Taiwan's air defense zone with unprecedented frequency in recent months. We have all discussed this. Propaganda films have shown stimulated attacks on Taiwan-like territories and US bases in Guam. So China is best when it comes to making TikTok videos and propaganda films, but in reality they are paper tigers, and soon it is going to be proved, right? Now, if you remember 2 or 3 days back, I told you how China is preparing for an invasion to Taiwan. It has mounted its missile systems directed at Taiwan, and its official mouthpiece, the Global Times, it also carried an editorial that get ready for forceful reunification of Taiwan next year. So things are changing very soon, and US is trying to help Taiwan. Then just the headline: Senate votes to confirm Barrett to Supreme Court. So in United States, a judge becomes a Supreme Court judge for life. So till the time she does not die or till the time she does not resign, she will be a judge of Supreme Court, right? She's a conservative judge. Then blast at Pakistan seminary, that is what they know what to do, so they'll be doing all of that. Another incident of racial violence: Philadelphia police's shooting of black man triggers unrest. Then anti-France protests rock Bangladesh, and France boycott call pushes Turkey even further from EU. Now these so-called people, if they want to boycott anything, they should boycott China and Chinese made products, because what they are doing to Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, is the worst form of atrocities they could do. But these fake people, they don't have the guts to call out China, so they are picking up on an easy target called France, right? But again, I'm telling you, major changes will be happening in Europe in coming days because of this bullying and this fanaticism and this extremism by people. They did not come out and condemn the beheading of Mr. Patty, but now they are calling for boycott of French goods. They should first call for boycott of Chinese goods, right? If they really believe in Ummah, then call for boycott of Chinese goods. Then just the statement by the finance minister: negative or zero growth, but firm recovery on. So this is the first time officially Government of India has accepted that there will be negative or zero growth this fiscal, but they are saying that there will be firm recovery in the next fiscal based on the parameters, the reports that are coming out. For example, the PMI report and the reports by different institutions and organizations like IMF, right? So that is why they are saying that there will be growth. Now coming to the Indian Express, Center throws open J&K. Again, we have discussed it. 4 days after House hearing, Facebook's Ankhi Das quits. So if you remember, we discussed how the House panel, the Joint Parliamentary Committee, was going to initiate breach of parliamentary privileges proceedings against Amazon, and we also discussed how Facebook representatives, they deposed before the committee. Now this Ankhi Das, she has quit. Now there was allegation that she is pro BJP, but then later on it came out that she is very close to Miss Mamata Banerjee, so nobody knows what's the deal, and now she has quit. Again, a very big political gimmick and a corporate thing. Then a Delhi court has said that the Anti-CAA stir meant to provoke disaffection against India. So it denied bail to some people and it made this statement. Then again, just a headline: act immediately on terror, Pak told. America has been telling Pakistan since 2000, nothing has been happening. Then eye on China, India, US raise defense cooperation. Now, besides the big deals, there are also small developments that are happening in terms of defense cooperation. For example, a secure video teleconferencing capability between the three services of both countries and foreign and defense ministers, enhanced sharing of maritime information, and meeting of military cooperation groups later in the year to revive the military to military engagement. These are some of the new understandings arrived at after the Indo-US 2+2 ministerial meeting. So these are the small developments, but they will add to big changes. Then again, center flags pollution role in COVID mortality, spike in 3 states. We've discussed this. Now, interesting thing, low COVID fatality rates in countries with poor hygiene, studies show. So probably their immune system has developed to such a high limit that their COVID fatality rate is low. This is what this is saying. Then an editorial, give reforms a chance. This is by Mr. Vinod Rai. He's ex-CAG of India. Now he's making some points. We'll just get into the selected points. So Punjab has taken recourse of Article 254 of the Constitution and has passed its own bills to nullify some provisions of the Central Act, right? Similar actions by Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan government are also expected. Now something about this constitutional scheme, please pay attention. The Constitution has placed agriculture on the state list. So it is on the state list, implying that state governments are required to address all issues relating to it. But there is a twist. However, it is the center which decides and announces support prices for major crops. It also decides on issues such as bank loan waivers, international agreements, and multilateral trade in agriculture products. So this is in the hands of center. So that gives center an upper hand in this matter. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest reasons for us not signing the RCEP was this agricultural issue only. So there has been a considerable debate for moving agriculture to the concurrent list, and it has happened in the past. The 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it moved 5 subjects from the state list to the concurrent list. So your homework is that you should find out what those 5 subjects were, right? One of them was education, then there were some other things as well, right? Now there are 3 lists, as I've told you, under Schedule 7, the state list, the union list, and the concurrent list. On the state list, the state governments have the exclusive right to make laws. On the union list, only the central government can make laws, for example, defense of our country, right? And on the concurrent list, both the center and state can make laws. But if there is a clash between central and state laws, it is always the central law that prevails, right? Or generally, it is the central law that prevails. Now, there are some other constitutional provisions in the union and concurrent list. For example, entry 33 in the concurrent list, it limits the power of states in agriculture by empowering both the governments to legislate on, again, see, pay attention. So entry 33 in concurrent list gives both the center and the state powers to make laws on production, trade and supply of a range of agricultural foodstuffs and raw material. So again, center has upper hand, though it is under state list, but for all practical purposes, center seems to have an upper hand over states when it comes to agriculture. In fact, Sarkaria Commission had opined. Now Sarkaria Commission was a very important commission which dealt with center-state relations. So when you do your polity, you will be reading about Sarkaria Commission. Opined on the union government using NT 33 to promulgate the Essential Commodity Act in 1955. This essentially enhanced the center's power. Now we have already discussed it that the Punjab bill under Article 254, it would first need the assent of the governor. So first of all, governor would not give the assent. But Constitution mandates that such a law which seeks to override central law, it has to be given to the president by the governor. So president would also not accept. If president accepts for political considerations, then it will again just be a paper thing, because center would still be going for the procurements and everything would be happening. So this is what he is telling. So rest you can leave, but this part is related to your polity syllabus. Article 254. Then we also saw how center decides on major issues relating to agriculture, and entry 33 in the concurrent list, and 42nd Constitutional Amendment. These are the things that you should know from this. Then again, under amended UAPA, center declares 18 people as terrorists. We discussed yesterday water on moon, a discovery and estimate, and why it matters. Why it matters because I told you yesterday as well, under the NASA Artemis program, NASA intends to send the first woman to moon and man back to moon by 2024, and for moon they want to go further to Mars. Now for deep space exploration, they would be making moon a colony, and for that water would be very, very important. So that is the importance. Now what is so different about this new discovery? So earlier we were not sure whether the detected molecules on moon were in form of H2O or the hydroxyl form. But this study has confirmed H2O molecules discovered in Clavius crater in moon's southern hemisphere. It also shows water on the moon is not restricted to shadow regions. Sophia, which is a modified Boeing 747, so it is just a Boeing plane jetliner and flies in altitudes up to 45,000, has an infrared camera that picked up wavelength unique to water molecules. Concentrations are low, right? Now, how could water have formed? Space rocks carrying small amounts of water could have bombarded the moon, Alternatively, sun's solar winds could have carried hydrogen, which then reacted with minerals in lunar soil, NASA said. Now, the sunlit surface retaining water presents a puzzle since moon does not have a thick atmosphere. Now, when you study geography, you will get to know the role of atmosphere in retaining water in any planet, right? And Earth's atmosphere is perfect for retaining that water. One possibility is that the water could be hidden between grains of soil and sheltered from sunlight, NASA said. So how widespread is the water? We have already discussed, from few millimeters to 30 kilometers or more. What next? Sophia will look for water in additional sunlit locations to learn more about how water is produced and stored. So this is about it. Why is it important? For deep space exploration. And what is different? Confirmed H2O. Earlier we were not sure whether it is OH or H2O, right? Then France, Macron and Islam. So before this attack on Patty, Macron had made statement that there is Islamic separatism within the country and the need to counter it through rules and values of the Republic to build a French version of Islam. Like I've been telling you, every major country has its own version of Islam. Be it Iran, be it Saudi Arabia, be it UAE, be it Qatar, every country has its own version of Islam. So why not France, right? It has to be in line with the values of the French Republic, right? So there has been problems, and some parts of Paris, they are called as lost territories of the Republic because the concentration of Islamic population, and they really don't seem to follow the French laws. So that is the condition that is in France, and not only in France but throughout Europe. So again I'm telling you, there would be a huge churning in Europe in coming days. Now, what is the French definition of secularism? See, in India, the definition of secularism is that state is equidistant from every religion. That means state equally respects every religion. But in France, you cannot have any form of religion in public life. That is, state is completely divorced from religion. And that is called laicite. It sees no place for religion in public sphere. Now, there have been problems, for example, banning of turbans, banning of Sikh symbols, and then banning of burqas, burkinis in France. So the major problem has been with these Muslim citizens who form the largest group of Muslims in Europe, ahead of 4 million Turkish Muslims in Germany. So, and if you see, Germany is standing firmly with France because they know the potential. And see, this has been happening. For example, in January 2015, to apparently avenge the publication of Prophet Muhammad cartoons by Charlie Hebdo, there were attacks. Then in November the same year, there were coordinated terrorist attacks in Paris and suburb that shook the entire world. So France has been facing the brunt of these Islamists and jihadists. Why? 2005 rioting, then 2010 burqa ban, 2011 Charlie Hebdo. Now these people are coming to France, but they are not ready to live by the rules of France. They want to convert France into an Islamic country, or they want France to follow Islamic laws. It can't happen like that, right? If you go to somebody else's home, you have to follow their laws, right? In Europe, France was the country with the highest number of citizens who had left to join ISIS in Iraq and Syria in 2014-15. And the law and order situation in Paris has become really pathetic. It is not such a romantic city anymore. If any of you ever goes to Paris to travel, please take care. Crime rate is very high. So even though there is a real constitutional basis to Macron's position on Islam as necessitated by Laissez, it is also political necessity. No French politician at this time believes he can afford to ignore the impact of these events on French national life. Macron, who describes his politics as neither right or left, he was with the Socialist Party till 2009. He is going to again face election in 2022. Now it is not a very convenient thing for him, but he is taking a very tough stand. For good measure, Macron has also announced controversial anti-separatism bill. If you remember, we have discussed this as well, to crack down on Islamic radicalism, that is to be introduced in Parliament in December. It envisages a range of measures including school education, reforms to ensure Muslim children do not drop out, stricter controls on mosques and preachers, and has caused concern among Muslims in France. So this is what is happening. It is starting with France, but it will spread to Europe. Then page 12, Senate confirms Barrett, so she has become Supreme Court judge. I've already told you. blast at seminary in Pakistan, everyday thing. Swept by COVID-19 surge, Europe enacts new restrictions. So there's a second wave in Europe. France tells citizens abroad to take precautions because of what is happening. Then fake news spread on WhatsApp to Indian Americans worries campaigns. So Indians are same everywhere, no matter where they live, and they have the same thing that if it's on Facebook or WhatsApp, it must be true. So fake news is being spread there through WhatsApp during this presidential campaign. You can take an Indian out of India, but you cannot take India out of an Indian. So folks, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel. Also press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new videos, and please give us a thumbs up if you liked our videos. Also connect with us on our Instagram page UPSC for everyone, and please connect with us on our Telegram page where you can access the PDFs of the videos that I'll be posting daily, right? So see you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.